Greetings, sir and sirettes, and welcome back to From the Depths with me, Lathrix, and of course, welcome to hopefully quite a brief tutorial on the very basics of creating a Thrustercraft. I am making this because of the extreme amount of people asking me how the firework actually works, and I am using the term Thrustercraft, meaning that I am talking about a flyer which does not use wings, ailerons, or tail segments. It uses only thrust to stay in the air, to control its pitch, and pretty much to do anything to do with movement. The Firework here is my most used Thrustercraft of all time, and Thrustercrafts are very easily my favourite flyer type in the game currently, because they're very easy to set up, they're very easy to balance, and they're very easy to customise. So, today we'll be making a very small one. We're just going to make one, go through the process of setting it all up, making sure it can fly, which hopefully should teach you the extreme basics, nothing overly complex, about making a basic flyer. And yes, I have used the word basic quite a few too many times. So, let's delete all the vehicles currently in combat. Well, the Marauder, by the looks of it, is being destroyed anyway. And let's start building our own Thrustercraft. Okay, here we are in the fresh sandbox, so let's just get straight into it. Like I said before, we're not going to be doing anything fancy, we are going to be building a very basic thing, and probably it's going to look very odd when we're finished. So I'm just going to make a very quick metal section here so we can start building off it, and this is just going to be our little building platform. Again, nothing really important about doing this section. And of course the raft is made out of tiny little blocks, so deleting it is a little bit more difficult than it should be, and there goes our avatar into the depths itself. So, the first thing we're going to need, of course, is an engine, and because I want to be a little bit derpy, we are going to, instead of adding a regular engine, we are just going to make this electric powered. This is going to be a purely electric powered flyer, so that will be interesting if nothing else. So let's just quickly add our storage here, like so. And like so, and there we go, we have our batteries and we have our electric generation. Now, I would personally recommend using the fuel engines, but I'm just doing this for the sake of it. Honestly, I just want to see how this would actually work. So there we are, we now have an electric engine producing power, as we can see in the bottom right. And that's honestly one of the most important things we have. Now, the one thing I will say is I don't want this centre of mass to be so far back. That just means the whole flyer is going to lean backwards, and that's really not what we want. We either want it to be perfectly in the middle or a little bit forward, honestly. It's not too bad if the Thrustercraft naturally nosedives slightly, as we are going to be using thrust to control our pitch, and our pitch is going to be changing during combat anyway, depending on how you do the settings. I just personally don't like it here, and of course, there we are. Our centre of mass is indicated by this lovely white here, so it's nice and easy to see, nothing over the top there. And to counter this, let's just add a bit of metal to the front, because why not? This is going to be a very odd contraption. Must be said, this is going to be very curious. There we are, now it's more in the centre, if not completely, and then let's just add some jet engines, or at least one giant jet engine on the back, which leads us now to the most important part, in my opinion, in terms of actually getting this thing running, which is the AI. And yes, I know I called the engine the most important part. Everything is the most important part. It's all synergy, and I care about everything individually. So we've just added our aerial movement algorithm. We're going to change this up. Our angle deviation I'm going to put to 0. Our angle deviation before we roll I'm going to put to 180, as I find that produces the most reactionary Thrustercraft, which tends to be one of the strong suits of even using this type of flyer, so going to the extremes there. The minimum and cruising I tend to keep it the same, as I personally don't like Thrustercraft diving, though that depends on what weapons you're using, how you're going to use the Thrustercraft. Do you want it to be a bit more dodgy? If so, then the minimum altitude being lower than the cruising would definitely be better, because that means as it goes to the attack run, it's going to lower itself towards the enemy. I personally prefer it to be nice and smooth, because I just think it looks prettier. So there we are, and if we turn it into combat, That should turn the thruster on, and we can see it's fairly flat. The flight is fairly flat. There's no major pitching. It's pitching a little bit upwards, but not really too much, which is lovely. So the next bit we're going to need is the ability to turn, because currently it can move forwards, and that's actually it. Now, the important thing when you're doing this is make sure that the thrust going either way, left or right, is equal, or at least on line, with your centre of mass. If it's not, if it's below it, it's going to start causing the flyer to pitch upwards whenever it turns. If it's above it, it'll cause it to pitch downwards, and then it spirals out of control and turns absolutely horrible. And I do not have mirror mode on. That's always useful. So there we are, now we can actually turn, and as you can see, it's trying to turn straight away, and causing a few pitching problems, which we will solve in just a second. So, what else do we need then? Well, we're going to need an ability to pitch upwards and pitch downwards, which is actually the opposite of the order I just placed, but either way you get the idea. So now it's trying to get to the altitude we've set it at, but currently, because we haven't balanced anything, it's now doing this, which is honestly to be expected. So there we are. The mass is all over the place. Like I say, this isn't going to be balanced. This isn't going to be anything fancy. It's hardly going to work, but it should do, because these are all the basic elements. Now, if we're going to air, we have this lovely thing, the jet stabilizers. Jet stabilizers use engine power to level out the vehicle. Put one on each side to reduce roll, and one on the front and back to reduce pitch. Of course, we don't really want to reduce pitch, but we do want to reduce roll. Now, I tend to try and put these in line with the very center of mass, but honestly, as long as it's on the level of center of mass, I'm probably saying that completely weirdly, not higher or lower, it tends to do a little bit better, at least in my experience. Some people have said otherwise, and I do respect there is some merit to all of these. Well, a bit of a jump cut there, because I have just committed a bit of a building sin in that previous clip. I added far too many jet stabilizers. By adding so many, it caused the flyer to completely flip out when it tried to self-right, it caused it to go way too high into the atmosphere, and a whole host of other minor problems. When you're using jet stabilizers, a lot of the time, less is more. They are actually incredibly effective, and unless your flyer is very unstable, 1 or 2 sets is definitely enough. This is currently flying on only 1 set. It's a little bit rocky, but as we can see, it's perfectly stable in terms of actually staying in the air. It's currently just going around the resource zone and just going back and forth, Nothing really too fancy there. So off camera, well, in the section I just cut, I just added these spikes to the front and added a little bit more thrust because I was noticing we had a lot more engine power than I first thought. So now we're going at a completely reasonable 66 velocity, which is actually pretty quick considering this is what is essentially a lump of metal. So I don't really know what else to talk about. At this stage I have covered pretty much all of the extreme basics in how I personally build Thrustercraft. Now, there are a lot of other things you can do, which I'm sure other builders would definitely point out, but I have kept a lot of them kind of more complex building aspects vague. Anything which takes a bit more thinking I've kept out of this video because this is for extreme beginners, and I do know that from the depths can be incredibly daunting, and building a flyer and building a submarine is kind of the first big achievements in this game, after building your initial boat at least. But of course, a boat isn't quite as impressive, at least in my opinion, as something like this. Anything that can fly or go underwater just looks a lot cooler in my opinion. But I will do one last thing, so I can actually show this off, and that's if you want a little bit more turning, thruster reverse and thruster reverse, but you have no space on the front. So if you want a little bit of extra turn and you have no space on the front of the craft, you want to use the back. If you do add the thrusters, please remember to add thruster reverse. If you don't, you're going to do what just happened a second ago and kind of flip out, which isn't really the best when it comes to a stable flight. Now, right now, the reason why occasionally this flyer is going kind of left, right very rapidly is because we have the angle deviation before turn on 0, meaning it always wants to go straight towards the target and is currently oversteering slightly. Now, that's something to do with balance. You can always lower the thrust on your side thrusters, you can always add less side thrusters and stuff like that. Like I say, you will learn as you can continue to build. There are a lot of preferences about how you want your flyer to look and how you want your flyer to act, and that's one of those really. This, although it does that little turn, does mean it's pretty much always pointing towards where it wants to point to, and when it's turning like this, it is now turning a little bit better. I'll be honest, I'm actually pretty happy with this flyer. It definitely turned out a lot better than I originally intended. It's still got a bit of a backdrop on it, but other than that, it's working absolutely fine. A bit of an ugly creature, I admit, but it does have space for weapons, and of course if you were actually building this, you would have the AI on the inside, you would build compartments, you would have ammunition on it so it can actually fight, because currently, well, it can fly, and that is all it can do. But it does so pretty well, so I'm actually quite happy. So I hope that this has helped some people. Like I say, this was very, very basic. If you do have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. And if you have enjoyed this video or just found it helpful, then of course, likes, favourites, shares, comments, all that good stuff helps out me, helps out the channel, and most importantly, shows that From the Depths is a series you wish to see continued in the future. If you have any tutorial suggestions, then please leave them again in the comments. I will be trying to make a few more of these in the future, as I do want to help out people, as I do find From the Depths is one of my all-time favourite games, but it is very daunting to get into at the start, and if I can help out, then that would be absolutely fantastic. So, thank you again. Sorry for making it a bit of a rambly outro, and goodbye. And goodbye, Flyer.